Good evening, Facebook family. Thank you for joining Brian and Janice again on this Sunday evening. We wish and we pray that all of you are well on this beautiful Sunday evening. We're back with you today and as a continuation of our subject last weekend, where we were talking about basically injustices in the Black community. Brian and I are so passionate about African Americans and our community that we really are hoping that each and every one of you are tuning in today, and stay tuned with us. Feel free to share this video. We do hope that you gain a lot of helpful insights out of this, and we want to educate you on what's going on in Black America today, in our society today. And I'm going to let Brian take you away on this.
Okay, well, we could discuss a couple of issues that we're seeing in the news. The whole concept around freedom, what is freedom, and then still discussing, having a candid discussion about race and racism, which is very necessary at this particular time. I mean, the world is protesting. The world is actually standing up for some form of justice as it relates to the treatment of African people, not only in the United States, but believe it or not, Europe, anywhere you go, China, it doesn't matter, Japan, Germany, they all suffer, the African people all suffer the same ills.
Yes.
So the world is protesting. Black people are standing up and saying that we are no longer going to be treated less than human beings. We're not the children of a lesser God than you are, and we're taking a stand. It's refreshing to see. I think we just have to continue to reinforce what we're taking a stand for. And when we say we want change and we want to see change, it can't just be surface change. It has to go deeper than surface change. Do you agree?
I do agree.
Okay.
Yes.
So what do you have to say about your thoughts?
I can't share all of my thoughts on this because Brian and I do disagree on some issues. But what I do want to say is that as a African American woman, we do have to stand up and do our part. A lot of us are raising Black men or have raised Black sons. We want to encourage them to always do the right thing, be cognizant of who they are, not being afraid or being dumbed down, but not afraid to speak up, but doing the right thing, and meaning not being out there involved in activities that are contrary to what you were taught at home. You know, sometimes I just, and I don't want to say this, but I can say I am all a part of some part of the justice system when it comes to how do I put it, Brian?
Dealing with rights, civil rights,
dealing with crime. Mm-hmm. When you commit a crime knowingly, what justice? I mean, that's just like somebody breaking into my home, mm-hmm. Okay, holding me at gunpoint, robbing me, and it could be Black or white. But in this case, I'm just gonna say if it was a Black man, you know, do I just want to sit by and watch that young man go by without any repercussions? You know, so that kind of stirs at me a little bit. So I'm gonna hold out right now, and I'm gonna let Brian continue on this.
Yeah, and I think that's where we differ. When we look at George Floyd and the situation surrounding him, it wasn't that he did not commit a crime. We're well aware, the general public is well aware that there was something going on with him that caused the police to be called out. What we're looking at is the brutality by which the law enforcement exacted on George Floyd. Yes. And they are supposedly peacekeepers, but yet in that time, they did not exemplify their duties to uphold the law, right, as it relates to treating all, whether they be victims, whether they be assailants, it doesn't matter. There is a creed that they have been sworn to uphold as it relates to how to treat someone that they arrest.
Exactly.
So the brutality in which they exemplified, the manner by which they exemplified arresting George Floyd was
wrong.
Totally wrong.
Totally wrong.
So, the actual discussion is not surrounding the crime that he did. The discussion is about how do you treat African people, and that is, far-reaching. That goes just beyond black men. When you deal with black women, police are just as brutal and just as disrespectful to our black women. So
yes, they are.
We have to deal with that. And I think that's what what we're looking at now. That's what the country is rallying around now. The cry is, do we not deserve to be treated the same way that anyone else will be treated? Like I said, we're not children of a lesser God.
No, we're not.
So we're just as human as anyone else.
Exactly.
So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, yes, it does. And we mean just that. All lives have mattered throughout history except black lives.
Exactly.
So now at this particular juncture in history, we want to reinforce that we matter, on the same level that everyone else mattered. And we should be treated just like everyone else is treated up under the law. So that's what I think, the country is rallying around as it relates to reform and change. We just have to, like I said earlier, we cannot fall for the okie doke.
That's right. Well, where do we go from here, Brian? What can we do? We're protesting all over the world. We are, blacking out. We are going against a lot of white businesses, Asian businesses. We're going against all businesses other than our own. We're trying to support our own. And we're doing the blackouts, we're making all these great statements. But when all of this is over, where will we be as a people? Will we be any better off today or 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago than we are doing all of this protesting? Where do we see, what can we do to take it to another level?
We have to demand that this goes beyond just another act being written concerning policing on the state level.
Okay. Is that part of the defund me? Is that what they're talking?
No, that's not part of the defund me.
Okay.
Because Congress, the Democratic Congress, is putting forth right now, as we speak, the 2020 Justice and Policing Act. It only addresses certain issues as it relates to policing nationwide concerning police departments on the state level.
Okay.
And when I say we should not fall for the okie doke, what I mean when I say that is, it's not enough just to write another bill or to put another act in place to deal with injustices as it relates to policing. Because, and I say that because once you do that, then you take the whole, what we're fighting for as it relates to equal justice across the board, you minimize that. You set that on the back burner, so to speak. So we have to make certain that the Congress people that represent us, the senators that represent us, understand that this is not just about policing. Because in every facet of society, the African American is treated unequal. In the school system, economically, on jobs, in every facet of society. In government, we are treated unequally in every facet. The peonage system or the prison system, we are treated unequally. So we can't stop at just saying policing, changing policing, the way they police us is enough. That will not solve our problems. And if we stop there, if we accept that the policies they're going to put in place, just as it relates to policing, and stop there, then 3 months later, sad to say, we're going to be looking at another situation, another form of brutality, and we'll be back doing the same thing.
Wow.
We'll be repeating the same marches and the same protesters, because they're not really dealing with true facts of what's going on as it relates to African people being citizens in this country. So when you look at President Trump, when he comes on TV and actually says that if the states cannot deal with these protesters, with these rioters, what he calls them thugs, then I will protect our citizens. The Insurrection Act that he is referring to was written in 1807. It was put into law by President Thomas Jefferson at the time. Now, here's the interesting thing about the Insurrection Act, is it states that before the president can actually go in and enact military authority over a state, he must first publicize it. So Trump getting on national news and saying that if the states can't deal with their situation, then I, as the president, will protect her citizens. I'm going to deal with. He's making a public announcement. He has to do that before the next step can occur. That is actually in the 1807 Insurrection Act. So we, like I say, black people, we have to understand what we are still considered as under the law. The 1807 Insurrection Act was actually put in place to deal with slave revolts. The slave revolts of the 1700s struck so much fear into our counterparts, into white slave owners, that President Thomas Jefferson, in order to offset that, not only did he put the Insurrection Act in place, but he encouraged slave owners to actually enact their own form of policing by way of slave codes, putting, like I said last week, putting curfews on their slaves, making sure their slaves had passes to move from one particular plantation to the other plantation. If they did not have that pass, then they could be arrested, they could be brutalized, anything could take place and it was okay. So there were certain things, no more gathering at the slaves' homes. They did that. On Sundays, they had to corporately worship where they could actually be seen.
Wow. So
it was so many things that were enacted as it relates to the slave revolts. The Insurrection Act was one of them. It was put in place to control, at that time, slave revolts. And the same process that Thomas Jefferson used, he said, we will protect our citizens. We were considered citizens. Citizens were slave owners that had property.
Wow.
Slaves were considered to be still chattel, no more than a field animal. They were still 3/5 of a human being, and they were never considered to be citizens under the United States Constitution. Until that is corrected, it doesn't matter how many acts or bills are put in place to correct policing. Until we have the same equal rights as a citizen under the United States Constitution, we will be spinning our wheels. So we've seen that even in the Rodney King atrocity, that California enacted certain policing rights. But that did not stop the brutality from the law enforcement in the state of California. It continued, and it still continues to this day.
Yes.
So Trayvon Martin, they put certain policing measures in place. That's when we see body cams were really reinforced.
Yes.
What did that do? That didn't stop anything. All it did was now show you the brutality and show you the measure of brutality. So we've got to go beyond that. We've got to demand that these black senators stop being do-boys,
Okay.
and stand up for our people and say, no, we need to be considered. This is a 200 plus, 400 plus year correction that needs to be done. And that 400-year correction has to do with the Constitution. We need to write in the Constitution verbally that African people, descendants of slaves, are United States citizens, and that they, as any other citizen,
Are equal.
deserve
Yes.
to be treated equally and fairly up under these United States Constitution and laws.
Yes.
If we do that, that deals with
Everything.
the issues. Because now you can deal with the economic issue. You can go back and deal with that. Now you can go back and you can deal with the school issue as it relates to poor education, our education coming up. Now you can deal with the fact that blacks are mistreated and underpaid on jobs.
Yes.
Now you can deal with black women being ostracized, subjugated, and not paid
Equal
equally
to their
as their
parents.
counterpart.
Yes.
So we can deal with all of those issues once that happen. But just putting policing acts in place does not solve our problems on a mass scale. So
Wow. Wow. So as you all see, that's the real problem. And what's going to happen, they are going to put another act in place. I don't know what it'll consist of. Brian and I are going to be following that. But we all have to come together and unite and demand for all of these senators, all of these legislators, everybody that we're voting and putting them in place, those should be our demands. That should be at the forefront. We are entitled to that until the Constitution is changed, where we are included as citizens of these United States. Nothing else will matter. It won't change. It will not change. There will be another George Floyd out there. There will be another Trayvon Martin out there. It will not stop until that Constitution is changed. Am I right on that, Brian?
you are absolutely right. And I think this would have been a good time,
Yes.
in my opinion, to push reparations.
Reparations,
If
definitely.
you want to correct the issue in the African community, let's talk about the first thing concerning what made us.
Oppressed.
Yes, second class,
Second-class citizens.
not citizens.
We're not citizens.
Property.
Property, okay.
Okay, so
Okay.
we were below the field animals. The field
Wow.
animals were treated better than our
Ancestors.
ancestors. So let's deal with the real issue. Slavery was about one thing: money. It was about the United States government being able to trade, import, export, and it was about free labor and building this country's wealth, period. There's no other argument that can be made as it relates to
Wow.
that. It was about economics. So if we really want to deal with this, we got to deal with, for 400 years, we have been oppressed, we have been suppressed, and we have been marginalized as it relates to having the same economic opportunities that the slave master and his children now benefit from had concerning economics. We worked for free. Labor from the African that built this country, they were not paid.
Wow.
And that was an injustice that has to be corrected. If we go back and look at from the time that the first slave stepped off of a slave ship in Jamestown, Virginia,
Virginia.
okay? If we would add up all the labor of the descendants of the slaves first slaves that entered into America, the slaves that were in America from the 17th, 18th, early 19th century, you would be looking at well over $13 trillion plus. That's not including the interest that's owed on that to the slave and his descendants. Now, if you got $13 trillion plus that we have been deprived of, you do not have a fair chance in this country. And until that is corrected, we're spinning our wheels. Until that money is put back into the hands of the laborers' children
and children's children
yes, that worked for free and built this country. I don't care how many injustices we deal with, that is the greatest of all injustices.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So we have to deal with that.
Yes.
You know, we have to go back and look at history and understand that the Civil War, sweetie, was fought over economics. It was fought over the Southern plantation owner not willing to give up his free labor. It was fought over Southern industrialism. We understand that it was fought over the actual importation and the great amount of wealth that they had accumulated
from
cotton. Okay, so there were many things that we have to go back and analyze and look at and understand that the Civil War was not about slavery. People are confused when we think that the Civil War was about slavery. It wasn't about slavery.
About economics.
It was about economics, exactly. Mm-hmm. And about the slave-holding Southern plantation owners not willing to compromise as it relates to the shifting of wealth to the North.
Wow.
That's what slavery was about. So when we go back and we look at history,
yes,
okay, we look at in 1816, Andrew Jackson and James Monroe, okay, actually put forth a bill to free slaves and to export them all back to Africa. Okay? That bill was put in place to deal with the fact that if we do not do something about, at that time, these 3.5 million slaves that is continuing to rebel in some form or fashion. This was before the Gabriel Prosser rebellion. This was before the Denmark Vesey. So when we look at that, they said, we've got to deal with these people. The way that we deal with them, we've made the money. We can sustain from this point. We can bring in immigrants and migrants from Europe.
Wow.
Now that the foundation has been laid, they don't have to work as hard, but we can bring in that lower peasant class to take the place of the slaves. So let's ship them all back out. So in 1816, over 12,000 Africans were shipped back to Africa. In 1847, we would see that the United States would fund then what is now called Liberia, the nation state that is a colony of the United States, and it is the freed slaves' descendants from America that now exist there. So we have to really understand what history teaches us concerning who we are and how America views us. Okay? So President Lincoln, even in one of his cabinet meetings, stated that he did not know what to do with the slave, that he was not in support at that time of freeing the slaves. So it was never about emancipation for Lincoln. It was about how to save the country based on economics, dealing with the South and the North, right?
Right.
So we have to correct that.
Wow. So, and we've already discussed how, again, to get that going. You know, and it can start with one. It can start with just this group. We are voters, and we have the opportunity real soon to make a difference. I forgot how many Senate seats are open. Like, it's
3 or 4 for Alabama.
For Alabama.
Yeah.
It's like 3 or 4 seats open. And then we just need to look at and put that out there. Mm-hmm. This is what we're asking. And I'm sure now with enough people out there protesting like they are, and this young generation that's coming on now, they are serious. They're not playing. They want equal justice. And they truly believe Black Lives Matter. They really do. And we do. We've always mattered. Mm-hmm. So it's left up to us. It really is.
We have to pick up the phone. We have to call the senator's office and demand economic justice be served to the African people. See, earlier in the debates, it was about reparations.
Reparations. They cut it. What happened to that?
They shut it down. Why? Because they, and when I say they, the United States government does not want to pay any retribution to the African people because they are still under the banner of property. So property cannot own anything. See, property can't own property.
That's right.
Okay? So until that is corrected, the United States government has a way out. There's a loophole there that says, well, we don't need to deal with reparations. Let's just pad the fold, so to speak, and let's offer them 2 years of free technical college. Let's pump more money into those programs. Let's increase a little bit of the food programs.
The educational system.
Yeah. And not only that, when we talk about food programs, you're talking about food stamps,
yes,
other subsidies as it relates to welfare, the welfare system.
Yes.
Okay, so let's just pad those things over, get them to hush up, get them to go away, because they are not going to stick with anything. Their history says that they do not follow through with anything. So until Black people, from a standpoint of a mindset, we change our mind as it relates to accepting second-hand handouts by this government, nothing will happen. So we have to demand, we have to pick up the phone and call our senator or our congressman, and if nothing else, leave a message. If it's enough of us leaving messages, we have to generate a petition that says, no, we want reparations. We don't want to just start and stop at police justice.
Right, exactly.
Okay?
Yes.
That still does nothing for our public school systems that are falling apart. That does nothing for our young Black women that are having to work 2-3 jobs, raising children on their own. Exactly. There does nothing for the young Black man that's out there that cannot get a job. Nobody will hire him because they stereotyped him. That does nothing for the children that are coming up in these households already disadvantaged because they're Black. So we have to begin to demand some real change. Let's not pander to the masses. Okay? Because a lot of who you see on the front lines protesting are plants.
Wow.
They're put there purposely to add a diversity of color. And it blinds us to the real issue.
To real truth.
Yes.
The truth.
And the real truth is, this is not about everybody else. This is about Black folks.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
So we have to shift that. When we see the news, I said earlier, don't fall for the okie doke. Please understand that certain lobby groups, understand that certain groups of interest are out there for their political interests. They're not really out there in support of Black Lives Matter.
No.
Okay? The holding their hands, the laying down on the ground, many different races, many different ethnicities, whatever you would want to call it. They're out there as props. Now, some of them, yes, I can say have genuine hearts. So I don't want to categorize. I don't want to paint it with a broad brush. Right. I do want to say that there are those that genuinely want to see change as it relates to police brutality. But those same people do not know our history. So they cannot identify with the problems that we have. Especially immigrants that come over here and get jobs, get loans, when we still can't get a job
tax
and
exempt,
can't get, that's
the
exactly
tax
the whole
for
gamut.
5-10 years.
So we have to deal with those things.
We do. And we can't even go into the bank. We can have a legitimate base business that we're trying to get a loan for, can show excellent revenue, income, and can't even get a loan from the bank. You know, that bothers us. You know, so that discourages us from even trying. You know, how many black banks do you have? I don't know. I don't know if any in the Montgomery area or in Millbrook or anywhere else surrounding Montgomery counties. So how are we going to get funding to start our own businesses? How do we even get that? So many of us have to start little home-based businesses that we just take from our little income that we get, and we try to build up off of that. But how many of us can actually walk into a bank and get a real business loan to start a legitimate business? Because we want to do the right thing. We want a piece of the pie as well. So how do we do that, Brian?
Well, when you look at the data census from 2019 as it relates to African Americans' median household income, which median household income is the highest income of African Americans subtracted from the lowest income of African Americans, gives you the median income of a household. It averages between $30,000 and $35,000 a year. That's the median household income for an African American. For Hispanic, it is $50,000 to $55,000 a year.
Yes, it is.
For Asian, it is over $70,000 a year. So there is a drastic problem in our community as it relates to economics. And that is because when the Constitution was written, we were written in and marginalized as a minority group. We were written in the Constitution as being a labor class people that was subject to the management class. That the labor class in the Constitution pretty much stipulates of not due any monetary reward. That goes to the citizen. That goes to the management class. The management class is put in place to simply control the labor class. So we still deal with those effects, if you will. They still plague us to this day.
Yes, they do.
Because when you walk in a bank, I don't care how much money you make. If you do not have a relationship with that bank, and in 1944 there were more African American banks than there are now.
Exactly.
There are less than 2% of banks that are African American banks in the United States. Okay, so if you walk in a bank, it is going to be very difficult for them to qualify you
for a loan,
because you are not management class. You are still looked at as labor class. So the first thing that the bank does is it gets your resume concerning your job history. Okay? So it wants to see what, as far as salary range, what salary range you fall into as the labor class.
Wow.
Okay? So labor class oftentimes is only
African American.
Can be rewarded labor property. Okay? You understand? So
and that's us, Black America.
That's Black America. But we have to understand all of those dynamics to what we're actually dealing with. And not only that, when we talk about freedom and justice, no justice, no peace, all of those things. When we're talking about that, we cannot isolate it to a few incidents or, just police incidents. We cannot isolate it to that, because there is no justice when we cannot equally walk out and walk into a bank and get the same treatment as anybody else get.
Yes.
So when we talk about no justice, no peace, let's please look at it from a viewpoint of understanding that is not just about the police brutality. It's not about the modern day lynching. Do you know that part of the Justice and Policing Act that the Democratic Party is going to be introducing tomorrow on the House floor states that lynching will be an illegal form of murder in the United States. Now in 2020, they're just dealing with lynching, and they're putting that in the act.
Oh, wow.
To say that lynching can no longer be part of a unfair treatment or a brutal treatment to African people. Now here's 2020, we're talking about 300, 200 plus years later, and they're just dealing with lynching today. Now. And the only reason they're putting that in there is because of what the police brutality has been labeled. It's been labeled as modern day lynching. So they're putting that word in there as a caveat to offset police brutality, to say that you cannot use excessive force, okay, to detain or to subdue a criminal. That you have to use the same force that you would use on a citizen. Okay? So now the word lynching refers to African American, because we are the only people group
that were lynched
in the United States of America that actually experience lynching. So we have to be aware of how politics work, how they word certain things, as it relates to putting subtle changes in place, but not really dealing with the big problem. Okay? So.
Okay. Wow. That was an earful. I got a lot out of that. I get it all the time, but that really got me. I was also thinking about when Brian mentioned in 1944, we had more banks, African American banks in the United States than we do now. That in itself, I even remember as a child, maybe 10 or 11 years old, my parents were able to go to a black bank in Birmingham, Alabama, A.G. Gaston, and they were able to get a loan to start to build a brand new facility, state-of-the-art nursing home facility, and they got a loan for $2 million. No questions asked. Because they were able to prove this is what we're doing with it. This is who we're helping. It was strictly for African Americans to have a long-term care facility when children or caregivers could no longer take care of their sick, elderly grandparents or loved ones in the home. There was a nursing home in Selma, Alabama, which was the first black nursing home in Selma, Alabama, and I think to this day has been the only black nursing home, W.J. Anderson Memorial Nursing Home, that was able to provide long-term care for African Americans. So that in itself, now, do we have that today? Where is that today? That's just one example of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they were able to go and get a loan for $2 million to build from the ground up a nursing home, a long-term care for African American, elderly, and disabled people. So those are the kind of things that, we don't have today. We don't.
We have a lot of challenges to face when it comes to calling ourselves a community, because we're not a community. A community is able to financially sustain its own self without the help or dependency of any other group. So technically, we are not a community. The word community is used so loosely, is used to be all inclusive, okay? To incorporate diversity.
Right.
Okay. But whenever that word is used as it relates to us, it continued to minimize who we are.
Who we are.
It continued to push us down.
Yes.
So we have to understand that, and maybe we can deal with this on some other time, but we have to go back and look at the whole concept of integration, segregation, and separation. We have to talk about those three ideas, and we have to understand what integration did. It severed some things that were very good in the African American community back in the years of the 50s, the 40s,
the 60s, even the 60s,
even the early 60s. Okay,
yes.
So we have to go back and we have to address that, and we have to look at what did our, at that time, communities do to be self-sustaining and to have their own businesses and to support their own schools. We have to go back. We have to step back and take a look and say, say to ourselves, there was something right that they did. Even in the process of being segregated, there was something that the Black community had that we don't have today.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
So when you talk about 1921 Tulsa, Oklahoma, the subdivision Greenwood that was bombed by the United States government, that's the same thing Trump is talking about doing. They went in one reason, and that was to wipe out the sustainability that African American community had created. Okay, they were a self-sustaining community. They didn't need anyone apart from themselves, and they were very successful at the plan that they put in place to take care of the whole community so that nobody lacked. That was the unique thing about Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that is why it had the term Black Wall Street.
Black Wall Street.
Because it was self-sustaining. We have to go back and begin to look at those things. Financially, we have to go back and look at some of those ideas that created communities like that. Even Selma, Alabama, at one time, Black community was a self-sustaining Black community.
It was.
So we have to deal with that. And we have to deal with the fact that until the United States Constitution recognizes us as such, as citizens, then we cannot advance. The laws are stacked against us. The constitutional laws are stacked against us. So until that is dealt with, until that is changed, we're spinning our wheels when it comes to police justicing. Yes, it needs to be done, and I'm very grateful that it's being done, but it's much deeper than that. So.
Okay. Awesome. Wow. I think we've done our 30 minutes. Have we? Are we there yet?
We've exceeded 30
We've
minutes.
exceeded 30 minutes. We try not to hold you guys too long. I am going to do a watch party with this video. And please, you guys, please share. The more people that know and hear about this, the better, the better. We can make a change. Together, we can do this. A lot of us came up in Black communities. We saw Black business owners. There were grocery stores. There were laundromats. There were, you name it. There were Black hospitals. We don't have that. We got to take it back. Go back to the drawing board, as Brian says. Start with your congresswoman, congressman, your legislator, all of them. We got to reach out, tap into those people, let them know this is what we need. This is what must happen for us to get what is so rightfully we deserve. And don't forget to mention reparations. Don't let them drop that by the ball. At one time, they were on board. It was floating around there pretty heavy for a minute. But now it is all diminished because we're focused. They've taken our focus off of it. There are a lot of things that are put out there and that are planned. They are strategically planned by government to take our focus off of what we're really trying to fight for. We really are fighting for reparations. We deserve that. We deserve that. Am I right, Brian? We deserve that. We deserve to be listed and put in the constitutional law as citizens of this United States of America. That is our right. This country was built on the backs of our ancestors. And until we get that, we will forever. It will only get worse. This was just a stepping stone. What is happening now, it is a great stride in getting us to where we need to go. But we need to take this platform and build it higher. And we can do that. Together, we can do that. And we're not afraid. We've never been afraid. And we got a generation that's coming up, that's here now. They are not afraid, and they have proven that in every way possible. And those are our children.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to lead them. We have to give them the wisdom. We have to go back and share with them the history so that they understand what they are fighting for.
Yes.
And so that they understand that, yes, we're concerned about everybody. But first, until you love yourself, it's very difficult to love anyone else.
Exactly.
So we have to love ourselves. Okay?
Yes.
And the only way to know yourself, to know thyself, as the great African proverb says, is we got to go back and love ourselves.
Yes.
So in the spirit of Ubuntu, we have to, the spirit of Ubuntu says, I am because you are. You are because I am. Okay?
Yes.
So we have to help our children to understand that love starts at home, then it spreads abroad. Okay?
Exactly.
So all of those facets of what we need to tap into and not be distracted by some of the things that's going on with certain protesters being of a different persuasion than our children, than ourselves. We welcome them,
yes.
But the fight is about us
yes.
becoming citizens. The fight is about us receiving equal justice across the board. They're not dealing with police brutality.
No.
We are.
We are.
Okay? They're not dealing with economic injustice. We are. They're not dealing with educational unfairness. We are. I could go on and on. Okay? So the fight is not about them. Yes, we welcome them to stand with us, but the fight, the front line of the fight has to be about total reform. Okay?
Total reform. Thank you guys for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday evening at 6:30 again. And as for today, Brian and I, we love you. We only wish you the best.
Bye, guys.
We'll wish with you all the step of the way, the whole step of the way. So again, good night. Have a blessed evening. We love you guys.
Bye-bye.